Today is Election Day, Tuesday, November 6, 2018. In the words of former President Barack Obama, don't boo, vote. And hopefully we all are going to do that today, or did that. This is a regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning. Let the record reflect Commissioners Sobroff, Bonner, Decker, Figueroa Villa, and Goldsmith are present, and we have a quorum.
Okay. Our first item for business is election of vice president. So we will ask for a nomination.
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Decker as Vice President.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Okay. All those in favor we haven't even acted on item 1 yet. All those in favor?
Aye.
You have a public comment card on item 1 that you're acting on right now.
Is there a card?
We have two cards on one, sir.
Okay. Okay, we got two. I'm sorry.
We have Mr. Herman and Mr.
Apologize.
Novick.
Hey, I apologize. Sorry. Thank you. Who's up?
Mr. Herman and Mr. Novick.
Mr. Herman?
Can't we all just get along?
Item number 1.
It's a very important day. It's election day. And I'm not surprised that Mr. Sobroff is trying to pass and expedite Mrs. Decker's appointment for this commission. Although there has to be some criticism of love before we go any forward. What is this love I'm talking about, Ms. Decker? It's talking about individuals who suffer mental health or persons with disabilities. Those who fall under the criteria that this unfortunate situation you're going to sit upon and listen to on a daily basis from all of us is to make reasonable modifications when interacting with individuals and that of your public. And for the record, in my statement, to reflect the record, officers have used and detained people with mental health disabilities due to their crisis. What is a crisis? Just because you talk about someone's past history of sitting in a prominent seat and get demoted, is that a crisis? No, it's called change. And people want to see change, Ms. Decker. We want to see reform. The same way Trump asked you to sit out of the White House situation. And I'm asking you with sympathy and heart, and not that of the devil like Mr. Sobroff, is to conduct the business for the people and only for the people under the legislation of the Brown Act, 54950 to 54963 ETSEQ. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Mr. Novick.
Morning, sir.
Morning. I think it's reflective of the disdain that the Police Commission regularly shows for public comment and public input, the way you proceeded with your business just now. I think the fact that there's only a single nomination and no dissent is reflective of the way that time after time you rubber stamp anything that's put before you without sufficient investigation. I hope that you will retake your vote because you just voted in violation.
We didn't vote, but we'll vote.
Excuse me, I heard you say all in favor approved. You were talking
no,
about...
I told you it was a mistake, and you said, I apologize, and you said, okay. So...
Yes, but I'm saying, okay, but I'm saying it's demonstrative of the way this board functions over and over again. You have a single nomination, it's a fait accompli, it was set in advance, it was done behind closed doors, and I think it's inappropriate. It reflects the fact that you don't take your duties and responsibilities seriously. You've been derelict time after time. You should have this meeting out in the public so that the public can have a chance to comment, and you don't ever do it, and so...
Next week?
Yeah, next week, fine, but you do this about 4 times a year, you said, so you need to do it every week. If the public had a chance to see how you function, I think they would be outraged, and I think that's why you hide behind the phalanx of police that are always here inside the police administration building. So I urge you to put off the question of electing a vice president until there's someone on the board who can function as a check on Mr. Soboroff and his high-handed chairing of the board meetings.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
We have no other public comments.
Okay, so let's redo this. Do we have a nomination for vice president?
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Decker.
Do we have a second? Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? No. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Any speeches or anything? Okay.
I spoke last.
Okay, thanks. Item number 2 are the consent agenda items. Do we have any public speakers on any of those items?
We have Mr. Herman on A, B, C, and D, and we have Terry Wilburn on B.
Okay. Okay, so Mr. Herman, why don't you do all 4 years? And you have Mr. Novak on D also?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I only did ABC, Mr. Soboroff. I only did ABC.
2A.
Which one do you want me to do first?
The one about for $20, number A.
Due to the criteria of painting, I brought my canvas painting in recognition of my donation of sharing my peaceful canvas with you so that we can share the same situations of love, prosperity, and behavior of good conduct. I just love when children speak. Come on, children, join me in my love
President, the
fest.
speaker's off topic.
That was your last warning, Mr.
Well,
Herman.
because of the canvas painting valued at $20 is not enough for a donation, I'm here to offer my donation for free. See, giving to the police department at Pacific area is the best way to paint the world, as Freddie would say, somebody to love me.
You wanna go to B now?
somebody to love. What number?
You want to go to 2B?
2B.
Relative to the monetary donation totaling $2,710 fucking dollars from various donors who fucking provide $960 to the Los Angeles losing team Dodgers under LLC Paul Krikorian and 1,750 bitches of Century City Mall under LLCs to be utilized for food and recreational activities. Now, I'm all forward to recreational activities, but fucking cadets is not part of the
Topic.
activity.
Off topic.
It's dealing with the Los Angeles area cadet program, rookie.
Okay, you can go to C now.
C for
done with B.
cunt. You're a cunt.
Off topic on C.
And
Los Angeles Philharmonic Association from the Los Angeles Dodgers once again. We got to stop utilizing monetary donations as a way of paying off the police from doing their job. Sending the police to work at the Dodger Stadium is offensive to the public because you're misusing public funds for the protection of people who don't need it at a safe game called the Dodgers, Mr. Soboroff. You see, the Dodgers promote love. You promote hate speech. And you definitely don't like what I have to say. Now, may I continue?
he doesn't have a card for C, sir.
Yeah, I
He
didn't have
doesn't
a
have a
card
card
for
for
C.
C?
For D.
Dummy.
Okay.
Fuck.
So, as you see, ladies and gentlemen, in the disguise of the department's report dealing with equipment
No, you didn't have a card for D. Are you finished with C?
That's what I was trying to tell you.
Okay. So
General
next-
public
next speaker,
comment was my
please.
last card. May I continue?
No, you didn't have a card for D.
For 5.
You didn't have, there is no 5, and you didn't have a card for D. Next speaker,
We
please.
have Terry Wilburn on 2B and Mr. Novick on 2D.
Mr. Wilburn. Good morning, sir.
Morning, how are you?
Good, sir.
It's been a while. Have a seat. This is my father, Elmer Wilburn. He have a little absentee, but sorry for the loss of the Los Angeles Dodgers World Series, but I don't think that the donation is needed for $270,000, and also, if you look at the Dodger stadium to Century Stadium, which I know in the fact that my cousin and them tried to take over Smith and Minor and others, Hamilton, to build in that area.
Mr. President, the speaker's off topic. This is on item 2D.
We're-
Who? No, 2D, I thought.
2B.
I think he's on B. He's on B.
B.
Yeah.
Okay. Not yet, my time.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
And since it's, although they go to the baseball game, they have enough money because the people that they destroyed it over there. Plus, in the Dodgers game downtown at the West End or the Tower, they kidnapped various different people and put them in life storage 700 in Slauson. They threw individual out on the top. I mean the what you call that? The tier. Okay, every apartment have a tier. Plus, they got zillions of dollars over there already.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Novick on 2D.
May we have a motion for approval of 2A, B, and C? All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, 2D, Mr. Novick, sir.
Yeah, I want to speak in general to your week after week. You had $15,000 this week. I urge you to urge the donors to give the money to better causes. I want to speak about this particular one, however, which is for the donation of funds to purchase, or I guess it's the actual donation is the items themselves. It's simunition rounds. I think that offering, I take it that simulated ammunition to the police is counterproductive. I think it encourages shooting. You have a ATM machine in the lobby that's called Quick Draws, if that's a joke. I think that the Sheriff's Department a few years ago bought a virtual reality trainer from the Defense Department that was designed to overcome the reluctance of GIs to shoot, and they claimed they were using it to train the sheriffs to shoot more judiciously, when in fact we've seen over and over again that the police and the sheriffs are shooting more times and more frequently, more rapidly. I think that's a serious problem. We noted here previously that although there are fewer shootings, more of them are fatal. I think that's because the police are getting trigger happy with this kind of training. So I'd urge you to reject the donation of simunition rounds, and I urge you to think about the kind of training you're providing the police that would reduce the amount and times they fire. For example, in the case of Eric Rivera, the officers involved had their guns drawn before they even got out of the car. They fired, I think, 7 times at a young man who was carrying nothing but a green luminescent water pistol and shot him dead. So I think that this donation should be rejected, and that it should be an occasion for examining how and why the police are trained to fire the weapons, under what circumstances, so they fire less often and fewer times when they do draw.
Okay. Any other public comments on 2D?
We have no other comment cards.
We have a motion for approval of item number 2D. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? No. Okay, we'll go on to item number 3. The department's report, do we have any commissioner comments or questions on the audit?
I do have a few questions.
Okay, so may we have... Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Chief. Mr. Smith, Jeffrey Phillips, Commanding Officer of Audit Division, and with me I have Officer Chavez, who is a project manager on the audit.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for the audit. I found it well done, and I should have mentioned last week's audit as well. So
Thank you.
Forgive me for coming up with the questions last week without thanking you for the hard work that I know the people in the audit division do. But regarding the Vice audit, I had a few, I think, procedural questions.
Sure.
First, having to do with the sample size, and I noted it in this year's audit, as compared to the audit 2 years ago, the sample size was smaller, and I wonder if you can just explain, is that because there were fewer arrests, or how did you calculate your sample size?
Yes, we did see that the population that we take the sample size from was smaller. What we noticed was that Vice units were often redeployed to either patrol or other activities, and therefore there was less arrests. So we did see that reduction in overall numbers.
And so your sample size was based on the total population?
Yes, ma'am.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Second, if I could turn your attention to the Miranda section. I noted of the 104 arrest packages, 44 were evaluated regarding documentation given on Miranda rights. And I have to admit I was confused on that section on how we went from 104 to 44. If you could just begin by explaining that.
Certainly. So there was 60 released from custody, RFCs, that essentially are misdemeanor arrests, and they were deselected because Miranda is not given. So that led us to the 44 that were looked at. So there's the reduction. If we were to attempt to look at, say, cases where defendants did invoke, that's kind of like what I call needle in a haystack. We would have to go through the entire population to...
If I could narrow my question a little
Okay,
bit,
sure.
because I think it might help. So there were 104 is your sample size, but of those, 44 were felony arrests. Is that right?
So
Did
there
I
was-
understand your-
There was misdemeanors. So when a lot of the times the arrests are accumulated, they're actually citations, and there's no
There's no
Miranda
formal
necessary.
arrest.
So yes,
In which Miranda would not be given.
yeah. So that's the disparity there. There's 104 to 44.
So 44 is where there was an actual arrest.
Correct.
Okay, now I understand.
Someone was taken into custody, yes.
I understand. That makes perfect sense. I have no more questions. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. President.
Do we have any public comments on...
Wait,
on
I just had a,
Oh,
I just had a
yeah,
couple.
sure.
Just
I'm
had
sorry.
a couple.
Commissioner Bonner?
Yeah, and these are should be pretty easy. I'm looking at the table on, I think it's on page 2. There's a table that just kind of summarizes the objectives, and I just noted in a couple of areas there were some, nice improvements from years past. Do we have any information as to what kind of steps were taken, to achieve the better performance with regard to consistency of information on arrest reports, the documentation of the daily activities, and the sergeant's daily report? Those were all each areas where there seemed to be some fairly significant improvement in performance. And I'm just wondering if
I'm looking at objective number 3, consistency of information on arrest reports, and that was at 100%.
Yeah, what I'm asking you in the prior year was that it was down in the 80s, and so I'm noting that there's been some improvements in these areas, and I'm wondering if we know what steps were taken to increase the performance in those areas.
Well, Commissioner, I noticed that these audits are taken very seriously by each of the respective offices, and there's always actions that are taken, whether it's sharing the audit results at roll call or wherever the entity that is responsible. So, from what I've seen in my experience is that the audits are taken very serious, whether it's a matter of changing policy or a matter of changing procedure, or sharing the results of the audit and just telling folks, hey, we really need to pay attention to these areas. I think that overall, when we look at, and I'm thinking way back to the consent decree, where we saw performance increase throughout those years, and it's because of the seriousness that these audits are taken by each of their respective offices. Commander Rodriguez.
Do we know? I know there in the with regard to some other deficiencies that are noted. There was a reference to there's going to be some additional reminders made. And was it as simple as that resulted in improvements in their areas, or was there anything more significant?
Correct. So, Commissioner, as Dr. Phillips was talking about, in addition to the seriousness of this, one of the things that the Office of Operations is doing is providing continuous reminders as it relates to these policies and procedures to further focus the importance on this type of documentation and these daily activities reports. Not only is it an emphasis that we place on the commanding officers while they review the logs, but it's something that we expect them to have that conversation now with their different unit leaders so that gets done. And that's why you're seeing the improvement. It's just a constant monitoring of that piece. And in addition to that, we have our own inspection team that we do send out to take a look at these systems to make sure that we are not only in compliance with the established policies and procedures, but also with the prior audits, and we continue on the right path.
Okay,
Excuse me, sir, can you identify yourself for the record?
Yes, Commander George Rodriguez from the Office of Operations. My apologies.
And one of their, just for informational purposes, are these paper-based reports?
Yes, that is correct. It is a daily activities log that the unit fills out at the beginning of watch. The supervisor does one as well, and we are still on a paper basis, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, do we have any public comments on this item?
Yes, sir, we have three. We have Terry Wilburn, Mr. Herman, and Adam Smith.
Mr. Wilburn, this is on item number 3A, which is about an audit.
Okay. I have some certain type of question with a statement on the videos of your department and wiring. I don't know what is taking in this steps, or I have a familiar mind that is what is taken. But from the standpoint, I'd like to know from you, is this also doing outside the lights area videos? Or this within the
after I answer your question, can you clarify what videos?
Oh,
this
the
doesn't deal with
video on
videos.
the streets.
Okay, so this deals with the report oversight of our vice operations and how we administer them at the station. The
Right.
oversight has nothing to do with videos in the streets.
Yeah, you can come back during the public comment section.
I still have within the stations. Okay, do you keep record, because you have so many people who got arrested, and it hasn't really, like in Southwest, a guy got beaten by the police officers, and all he was trying to do was help his neighbor because they was being robbed at 4066 Cocoa Street. Do your video or your operation of that, and now he's doing 30 years in jail for nothing.
Okay, so come back during public comment. And we'll
All
do
right.
this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Herman?
Pay attention was the remarks. And what arrest reports of the Miranda? Well, let's give some attention to that. And let's reflect on frequent individuals that have committed no crimes and present no significant threat or danger in this public hearing were unreasonably arrested. For example, got anything to say, Mr. Tiefenk? Were unreasonably arrested. And what does the audit reflect on that? Was it a hate crime? Was it hate speech? Or was that their opinion so ridiculously offensive that you had to have them arrested and detained and cost the taxpayers a routine of excessive expense to go to those goddamn courts that do nothing more but penalize innocent people for protected speech? First Amendment. Isn't that what we call Wayne Spindler from Encino, the critic? Protecting
President, the
public
speaker's off
interest.
topic.
No.
Hey,
I'm
off topic.
reflecting how arrest reports can drastically falsify people, and you're arrested.
He's still off topic, Mr. President.
Okay,
That's a part of the
that's the
audit.
end on this one. Okay.
Pardon me?
Are there any other speakers
I
on
got 12
3A?
seconds, Mr.
We have Ms. Adam
Sobroff.
Smith, please.
Why
Mr.
don't you let the
Smith, sir.
public finish their time,
Your time is finished.
jerk?
Morning, Mr. Smith.
Good morning. I always notice at the beginning of these audits, the second
Mr. Herman, stop disrupting this meeting.
You were
If
disrupting me,
you
sir.
disrupt this meeting again, you can put your sign down. I will ask you to leave the meeting. Stop disrupting the meeting. Mr. Smith.
All right.
Morning, sir.
Hello. So yeah, the second paragraph of most of these audits that I've seen, or the reports anyway, that I've seen over the last year or so that I've been coming here, it says, we conducted this performance audit under the guidance of generally accepted government auditing standards, except audit division had not obtained the required external peer review at the time of this audit. I obviously don't know much about this shit, but if something in the report says that it's required on all of these audits and none of that is ever done, I'm just wondering what that means.
So, sir, we've previously discussed, congratulations, Audit Division. They've just recently received their peer review. And as a matter of full disclosure, when we do these audits, we wanted to honor that standard to the audit community. So it's not a deficiency as much as just what the capabilities of this audit team was when this audit was taken in regards to generally accepted auditing principles.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
And we have no other cards on this item?
We have a motion for approval of item 3A. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? No. Item number 4, Morning Chief. Thank you, everyone. Good job. Good results.
Good morning, Commissioners. My regards to significant events, this last week we've continued in our outreach efforts with our Jewish community and really all the faith communities throughout Los Angeles in the aftermath of the horrific attacks in Pittsburgh. This past week, I want to thank personally Commission President Sobroff and Commission Vice President Decker for your attendance at the Hillel Foundation at USC this last Tuesday night, as well as other events that occurred throughout the week, and including as recently as last night. We've continued to take this opportunity to deepen our relationship with stakeholders in the Jewish community, whether it be all aspects of that. Additionally, this past week, I'm happy to say that the Halloween festivities of last Wednesday night occurred with a very upbeat mood on the Hollywood Boulevard. I was there and spent some time on a footbeat. And had a great opportunity to see our officers interfacing and having just a bended knee and a smile with a number of young children in costumes, and a very responsible and festive attitude permeated the crowd, and a very good evening. Last Thursday, we also had an opportunity to meet with all of our senior staff, as we do once a year for a executive level training session. Again, Ms. Decker and Mr. Sobroff, thank you for being there and attending that all-day session. I found that the Mayor Garcetti also was in attendance, and it gave us an opportunity to do a quick sum up of where we've been as an organization with my moving into this position, as well as overall for 2018, and even more important, where we're going. And again, I want to report to the public that this department is in good hands with some outstanding leaders throughout the command and staff officer ranks, people who are dedicated their life to public service and are eager to continue in their work and continue to see the excellent work of this organization in building trust. This past weekend, I attended the Ward AME Church with my wife and took the moment to encourage people, as everyone has heard today, to vote today. This is an important act of democracy, one that is oftentimes become too taken for granted. I've heard the remarks about mid-year elections and how underrepresented those often are. And when we look at the history of voting, the amount of time even women were allowed to vote, or across this country, people of color were told that this was the wrong polling place, or they were not allowed to vote. We are, as much as this is a grand experiment in democracy, we are still very young in the aspect of exercising our right to vote. And this morning I engaged in that activity, and we reminded the audience and the congregation, as well as extending to them an interest, a real desire. LAPD is hiring, and we're hiring from all communities throughout Los Angeles, and our attendance on that church service was to encourage the hiring of qualified men and women from our faith communities as well. Moving over to our crime, there was no categorical uses of force this past week, but moving over to our crime numbers, we have seen a recent increase in the number of shootings that has occurred, particularly in South Bureau. Just yesterday, we had 3 shooting victims in the morning hours in South Bureau. This has resulted in us shifting some resources to address this, the gun violence. The gun violence is occurring primarily in the street, and individuals involved in some type of conflict, generally not family-oriented. But that is on the backdrop of what was otherwise a very good week, where we saw fewer violent and Part 1 crimes than we did the year before. Year to date, we have a 10% reduction in homicides, and we have 829 fewer violent crimes today than we did a year ago. That's a 3.3% reduction. And on all of our categories currently, even despite this recent increase in shooting violence, continue to see a decrease. In regards to our property crime, we have a 2.6% decrease, which means overall Part 1 crime in the state of Los Angeles as of this past Saturday is more than 3,000 fewer Part 1 crimes today than last year. Now, we recognize that crime is often unreported or underreported, so while we take some comfort in this, and we do gauge and calibrate our responses based on data-driven nature of our crime analysis, we also recognize that there are still that this is just one barometer in determining public safety. Relative to our officer-involved shootings, we now have had 27 officer-involved shootings. That number was 37 last year. That's a 27% reduction. And the number of those 27 shootings that resulted in a fatality were 11. That number was 13 last year, and our 4-year average to date is just under 16. In regards to our personnel, sorry, let me move over to the traffic function. We have had 6 fewer traffic fatalities this year versus last. That's 190 versus 196. We are seeing a reduction in motor vehicles versus PED, which I'm encouraged by. 6 fewer people have died this year versus last year in a motor vehicle versus pedestrian accident. However, our bicycle collisions remain stubborn with 15 individuals who have lost their life this year versus 14 last year. That gap has narrowed, but it's still, cycling is still remaining one of our primary concerns with traffic collisions, as the importance of distracted driving and people ensuring that the rules of the road afford bicyclists sufficient room in the right-of-way need to be protected. Regarding personnel functions, we have 9,995 sworn personnel on payroll, 2,985 civilians, and 385 reserves, and 1,428 cadets. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the chief, or should we open to public comment? Do we have public comments?
We have 6 public comment cards.
Okay.
Mr. Novick, Valerie Rivera, Paula Miner.
Mr. Teefank, as Mr. Nova comes to the mic, would you please discuss the community meeting next Tuesday?
Absolutely, Mr. President. The community meeting next Tuesday begins at 6:30 p.m. It'll be at the Expo Center located at 3980 Bill Robertson Lane. And there should be ample parking, and the public is welcome to attend.
Thank you, sir.
Is that instead of the morning meeting?
What?
Is that instead of the morning meeting?
6:30 p.m.
Yes,
There'll be no
that
morning
is the
meeting.
board meeting, yeah.
There'll be no morning meeting. Be
Yeah.
a full agendized meeting.
Go ahead, sir.
I had a few questions. I thought there was a police pursuit that ended in a very violent crash last night. I just caught it on TV. I was wondering if there's any comment about that. There used to be a lot of police pursuits, and there was some policy changes to try to discourage them because of the possibility of fatalities. I was curious also about, in terms of the meetings with the Jewish community, other faith communities, whether there were any meetings held with, if not now, Bend the Ark, Jewish Voice for Peace, other organizations that have opposed the deadly exchange between the LAPD and Israeli police forces. Also with Interfaith Communities United for Justice and Peace, or Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice. I think these are a lot of organizations that are disregarded because of the establishment orientation of this commission. In terms of the question of people exercising the right to vote, I think that one of the things that discourages people from exercising the right to vote is boards and commissions like this one, in which the vote that takes place is a rubber stamp. The people on the board do not represent the interests of the general public and the poor and working people in this community. It creates a lot of cynicism, disbelief that anybody they vote for at the level of the city council or the mayor or anywhere else is meaningful, because the decisions that get made seem to have no relationship to the interests or desires or concerns of the population at large. I think that Los Angeles, despite the slight reduction in killings this year, is in a crisis of policing and has been for decades, but it's getting worse overall. And the fact that the chief and the commission don't address that in a serious way creates a lot of distrust and disbelief that the so-called democratic system is going to operate in the interests of the people.
Mr. Novak, I welcome an opportunity for you to organize a meeting for those groups that you've identified. If you would speak with Lieutenant Brian Raffish, we'll be happy, or I'm sorry, Commander Gerald Woodyard from our community engagement group, we'll be happy to sit down with those groups that you've identified. Secondly, relative to the pursuits are down 10% this year versus last, as far as 10% reduction in number of pursuits, and I was aware of last night's violent rollover crash involving the motorist who was arrested for DUI, and his reckless actions that needlessly endangered the lives of not just of the community as well as the officers that were attempting to apprehend him. Thank you.
Next. Morning.
Good morning. October 25th, I had to celebrate what should have been my son Eric Rivera's 22nd birthday. I didn't come to these meetings the whole October because it's hard. I know he's in heaven, but it doesn't make it any easier. And it doesn't make it any easier knowing that those people that took his life are still out there working for this department. And it don't make it easier knowing that you all just sit there and do nothing about it. I would give anything to be up there with him. But I can't because I got so much more work down here on earth to do for him.
Would you like to take your public comment time as well? Okay, we'll start the clock for the 2 minutes of her public comment time.
It's just, this isn't right. This isn't fair. You guys don't do anything. What are you guys doing up there then? If you look at that report, you could pull out 2 handfuls of mistakes those officers made and more. How many mistakes do you guys need to prosecute a cop? How many mistakes does a cop need to make to get his badge and his gun taken away? Because I tell you one thing, those cops right there should be a prime example of when to take a badge and a gun away from them. And I don't understand why you guys don't do it. Is it pure laziness? Too much paperwork? Why do you guys protect them? Who are they? But negligent LAPD officers. Why would you guys want them on this department? When they go and they shoot an unarmed innocent person for fucking walking. There ain't nothing in that report that says my baby did anything to those bastards. They pulled up and they shot him dead in his tracks. And not only shot him, but ran him over with their out-of-control vehicle because they failed to put it in park.
Thank you.
This just ain't over with. This ain't over with. I would never sell my soul to the devil because I am a child of God. And so is Eric. And you all are your karma because you know what? I had it out for just those 2 cops. Those are the only people because they're the ones that killed my baby. But now all of you are in on it because you guys ain't doing nothing about them. So karma's gonna come and get your asses.
Okay, thank you.
For staying quiet.
Next speaker, please.
The next speaker, Paula Minor, followed by Adam Smith. And
okay, this is on item number 4.
And I want to acknowledge the grief of Valerie and all the families whose loved ones have been killed by LAPD in questionable situations. And that brings me to my comments for Chief Moore today when he talked about the 11 fatal shootings. There's a question involved about how de-escalation is being used by LAPD. An example is the shooting that did occur last week of Albert Raymond Dorsey, who was murdered by LAPD in the shower at 24 Hour Fitness in Hollywood. And allegedly, he got a hold of a taser. But he was in the locker room, he had just taken a shower, he was naked. So often when we come to this room and tasers are discussed, they are mentioned as non-lethal alternatives to be used by LAPD in particular situations. So the question is, the question from Black Lives Matter and our allies, we're concerned that if a naked man gets a hold of a non-lethal taser, how is he immediately murdered by LAPD? The question becomes, how can they then say this is a circumstance where officers shot him, murdered him, because they were in fear of their lives, which is always the question that we are always the rationale that is given to us in these situations. This is a community concern and question. In this situation, there is no way to explain how you say one thing is non-lethal, but then you say it results in a murder. And I think the community wants to raise this name and will continue to raise the name of Albert Raymond Dorsey. So I'm going to say his name, Albert Raymond Dorsey. Albert Raymond Dorsey.
Next speaker, please.
The next speaker, Adam Smith, followed by Tammy Murillo, Mr. Herman, and Terry Wilburn.
Mr. Smith?
Morning again. Chief, you talk about property crime, and I'm wondering how the LAPD sanitation sweeps work into that. On Sunday, this past Sunday, there was a notice put out at Harding Ave in Lincoln, in Venice, that said that a rapid response sweep was happening tomorrow, Wednesday. An unhoused resident of Harding Ave called me this morning and said that that sweep was happening now, about 2 hours ago. And part of that sweep was this, I think the nonprofit's called the Community Urban Gardens. They put in these planters that are obviously used to displace people so they can't sleep on the sidewalks and they become ADA incompliant if they do. But I'm just wondering, how come the LAPD sweep happened today? How come that crew was out there this morning to install these planters? It appears to me, and to the unhoused in Venice and to many other people, that LAPD is being used as like a private gentrifying force for private companies. These planters are being sponsored by private residents, private companies that are paying $1,200 a year to put them in and maintain them, insured, when basically they're unpermitted, they're unsanctioned by the city. Bonin's office tells me that they're unpermitted. This reporter asked the Bureau of Engineering, said they're unpermitted. So what's the difference between a human's property that gets thrown out in sanitation sweeps versus these planters that are getting installed unpermitted sitting in the middle of the sidewalk? Because to me, that's trash. It's just better looking trash that's getting rid of a problem.
So the street services, the Healthy Streets cleanups that are occurring are not led by the department, by LAPD. They're led by LA Sanitation. They're actually the agents that are charged with that. As to those structures that you're identifying, I would ask you to contact Bureau of Street Services out of Public Works. That is not an area of responsibility for the department, as you might understand.
LAPD is there today, clearing these spaces.
LAPD is there for the safety of all personnel involved. And as to the relationship with property crimes, if a person believes that the property has been taken from them or stolen from them as a result of these cleanups, we will take a report from them and investigate it.
Joe Reyes died of a heart attack.
Thanks. Next speaker, please.
Tammy Murillo.
Morning.
I want to speak on a topic of police brutality. Police brutality is defined.
Can you move the mic a little
as the
closer?
deliberate use. I'm sorry?
Move the mic a little closer.
Hello, I want to speak on the topic of police brutality. Police brutality is defined as the deliberate use of excessive force carried out during law enforcement activities with the population. The most common form of police misconduct is excessive force, with the second most common form being sexual assault. In addition to excessive force and sexual assault, police brutality also includes verbal attacks, psychological intimidation, false arrest, and malicious prosecution. Furthermore, the failure to intervene when fellow officers violate the constitutional rights of citizens is another example of police misconduct. As you can see, many police officers believe they can operate above the law, and unfortunately, the current system harbors that school of thought. In the police culture, supervisors and fellow officers often cover up mistakes in order to protect their own. But this blue coat of silence is unacceptable when lives are on the line. This occurs in every department, every division, at every level. Police officers are indicted in fewer than 1% of killings, but the indictment rate for civilians involved in a killing is 90%. According to an annual report that was reported by the LAPD, there were 44 officer-involved shootings in 2017, compared to 40 in the previous year. The report found that of the 44 shootings, 31 suspects were hit and 17 died. So far in 2018, there have been actually 29 officer-involved shootings. Our neighbors in Ventura County have a crisis intervention team program that trains.
Thank you. You can come back and finish during the public comment period, or if you'd like, I'll give you your public comment period 2 minutes now. Would you like to continue now or come back?
Okay, I'm confused because I filled out 2 cards.
Yeah, one would be for public comment? Okay. So if you'd like to go on, I'll let you do your public comment now as well.
No, because I still have something to say about my son's shooting.
Okay, so you can come down. Okay, thank you very much.
The next speaker, Mr. Herman.
Mr. Herman?
The greatest aggressive and violent police interaction has become so familiar with us being problematic in the city of Los Angeles. Failure to obey, loitering, disorderly conduct, disruptions in public meetings, failure to obey, unnecessary use of deadly force, as you have heard over and over, repeatedly. Why do we have this failure? It's a question that only officers can ask that lead to deadly force. In part, though, aggressive tactics such as these and those done within the LAPD is a training of fuel, an us versus them. Us versus them. And who's responsible? Steve Soboroff. Why? Because you see how he interacts with people with disabilities. I have an invisible disability.
But this is about the chief's report.
And look at how he interacts with me in the community and brings fear. Everything here related is to the community. Crime statistics, gun shootings, officers laughing when they shoot somebody. That's all the news. I am the media. I am the criteria of criticism. So fuck you, Steve Soboroff, 42 U.S.C. 1983. I do know what the hell is happening in my mind. You're the one that needs psychiatric.
Okay, next speaker, please.
Terry Wilburn.
Next speaker, please. You can have it when it's general public comment. Because they had losses in their family, and so I did that. You're not getting your public comment time here, so you can either sit down or I'm going to ask you to leave. So now I'm going to ask you to leave.
The last card was for Terry Wilburn, and he is not present, sir.
Okay, we'll go to public comment. Herman, go ahead. Do your public comment now, and then you can go. Okay, then just leave.
Clarence Brandenburg versus Ohio.
Who's next?
I'm next.
No, you are so done. You don't even know. You're going to escort Mr. Herman out, folks. Okay.
We have 9 public comment cards. We'll start with Hamid Khan, Gina Viola, and Mr. Herman.
Herman's done.
And Mr. Novick.
Okay.
Practices of violence and targeting and tracking and tracing keep up continuing. We come here every week and we try to raise awareness amongst our own communities as well. And I think primarily we also need to look at this forum that we're not here to expect anything from this group because fundamentally they are the shock absorbers of the system. The other ones, we come here, they kind of absorb that shock, they absorb all that stuff, and then they kind of flip the script on us and rubber stamp and all of that stuff. But we'll keep on raising this awareness, whatever it takes, because ultimately, when we fight, we win, and we will win. Because what is not being talked about, and this is something like now having Eileen Decker, who is one of the primary architects back in the mid to late 2000s during Viragosa's time, and then Garcetti's time is of this data-driven evidence-based policing. So we also have to recognize that who's being brought into the commission as well, right? Because if you remember when we made this whole public, the hearing on data-driven policing, the response from the LAPD was dismal at best and pathetic, absolutely pathetic. You had Horace Frank, who's the deputy chief, looking at his phone and presenting on data-driven evidence-based policing and lying in a public forum, which The Economist even caught up, and this was covered worldwide as well. So the question is that you have suspicious activity reporting, you have Operation Laser, you have PredPol, you have all these data-driven and more, Citizen is talking about it, but nothing is being looked into. The conditions on the ground are being created. And it's not just a targeted killing of people that is going on, because we are. Through public records, and we have a lawsuit going on, we are looking at all the laser zones and anchor points where people are being killed in. So there was this whole talk about
Next speaker, please.
committee and the commission to speak about data.
Next speaker, please.
Gina Viola, please.
Viola.
That is to come out. What is happening with that? What happened to the subcommittee on data-driven evidence-based?
Next speaker, please.
Shane Goldsmith? What is
Your time's over. Next speaker, please.
What happened? How are we going to proceed? Because we will keep on raising this thing.
Happy to talk to you after the end of the meeting, sir.
Yeah.
I'll update
Next
you on
speaker.
both those points.
Morning. Those are all good questions
Can ask
from
him.
Hamid. And I wish you would listen more and address those questions and speak to that. Predictive policing killed Eric Rivera. Predictive policing is killing people in the neighborhoods. You are sending your law enforcement officers out frightened. You're telling them where to be frightened and who to be frightened of. They can't even not kill a naked man in the shower. This is a huge problem. This is a huge problem. One person per month your officers are killing. You don't think it's related to the predictive policing? You don't think it's related to the data-driven information? Do you think it's related to the fact that officers don't live in the communities they're being patrolling? Do any of you live in the communities that are having any of these issues? You do not. You do not. So you shouldn't be speaking to it. You certainly aren't overseeing it by any stretch of the imagination. You're not even controlling it in this room. A woman who spoke earlier said false arrests equals police misconduct. In this room on May 8th, you arrested Dr. Melina Abdullah for assaulting an officer when it was I who was trying to push my way out of the room to see what was happening. I was the one. You didn't take me. You took Dr. Abdullah and arrested her falsely. As Melina often tells me, they don't want you, Gina, because of the way I look. A white woman, you won't arrest an old white woman exiting the door. But you took Dr. Abdullah and you arrested her. And you've arrested other people for disrupting these meetings. How can that be okay? That is why people don't want to come and speak at these meetings. They are going to be emotional. These are emotional things we're talking about. We need to be able to have a forum and we need to feel like we're being heard.
Thanks.
Mr. Novick, Paula Miner, and Adam Smith.
Mr. Novick.
Yeah, so I want to urge the commission again to not just have an occasional meeting in the evening as you are about to have next week, but every single one of these meetings should be held in the evenings out in the community. You know, how shameful is it that the chief of police is actually more respectful and more responsive to the community at these meetings than the members of the board of the police commission? So it's ridiculous. I mean, if I were the mayor of this city and I had appointed the five of you, I would get rid of all of you immediately. I mean, you're completely failing at every responsibility you have, including the one of acting as this kind of shock absorber that Hamid Khan referred to. You're incompetent at the assignment, and you've failed to fulfill any of the responsibilities that the community is asking of you to really look at the problem in its depth and its systemic nature. So, if you have any sense of self-respect, I don't understand how you can sit here week after week and act like a rubber stamp for the reports that you hear, for the donations that you receive, for the and turn a deaf ear to the pleas of people who have lost loved ones, family members. I appreciate you're actually listening today, which is unusual because sometimes you don't even do that. But seriously, if you have this responsibility, I mean, it's a political responsibility, it's a political job, it's a political appointment. You're complete failures at it.
Paula Miner, please.
Last week, when new Commissioner Decker gave her opening remarks, she referenced the 21st Century Policing Conference that was held during President Obama's tenure. And in that particular, the documents that came out of that particular conference, we are aware that one of the many recommendations was that civilian commissions whose intention is to represent and include the interests of their community should hold their meetings in accessible time, at accessible times and locations. So again, we raise the issue of holding these meetings not just periodically but regularly at times that are accessible to the general public, at locations, definitely after work, and specifically having them in those communities that are most impacted by many of the police policies that are being discussed. The meeting should not be at 9:30 in the morning downtown LA and police headquarters. This is not accessible. This is very difficult in terms of time, in terms of location, in terms of the cost of parking, and it is not community friendly. So again, we are raising that issue. I understand that there will be a meeting next week, but we also are aware that a number of community activists and organizations wrote a letter to the mayor in 2016 asking for the same thing. Your answer, this commission's answer, was to say there would be 6 meetings. In 2017, we've not had 6 meetings this year. And Mr. Sobroff at the meeting on the west side said the meetings would be quarterly. That seemed to be a just arbitrary change that he made. So again, we're asking for our meetings to be more accessible.
The next speaker, Adam Smith, followed by John Avalos Rios.
Mr. Smith.
Hello. Chief, going back to these planters in Venice, I got to push back on the thing about the LAPD being out there to protect residents and stuff. So these planters that are getting installed all over the place, the crew goes out and measures a couple of weeks before to make sure what size goes there, whatever. I'm just telling you, like, I have people that witness this. And 2 weeks ago on 3rd Street between Rose and Sunset, which has always been an impact neutral place where the LAPD has always like pushed unhoused folks to stay because there's no residences, there's no front entrances to businesses. So people have always been pushed to stay there. Now, 2 weeks ago, folks have moved because they've been moving every day. But the crews for this urban gardening initiative or whatever that's privately funded, we're out there measuring. And your Sergeant, Kristen Delatorre, who's like the homeless outreach, I think she's a former SLO. I don't know if she's still the SLO, but she's out there escorting these folks while they're doing their measuring. And there's I don't know what she'd be protecting. It seemed to the unhoused folks that were taking pictures that it just was this LAPD sergeant who generally they say is very nice to them, but she's out there escorting this crew that is essentially displacing the people that have lived there for years. So you can say that they're out there protecting, but to me and to them that have lived there for years, it looks like your sergeant is out there helping gentrify the neighborhood.
Thank you. Next speaker.
And when Eileen Decker, congrats on your vice presidentship. When you take over for Steve, I just hope that you take the public more seriously than he ever has.
Next speaker, please.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I definitely, thank you. Hi, there's people here from the coast over here in Ventura and Oxnard. I want them to know that we feel that this is not a civilian oversight of the police. All of this is part of the police department, which is okay. If that's what you want, fine. And if you want to have your meetings here, fine. But it is not civilian oversight. The other thing I want to say is La Señora Valerie, la mamá de Eric, the boy that was killed, it's over in the Harbor Division where they want to build a new prison. The lady last week, the reason I got upset, and I had to explain, that's where they want to, there's a blonde lady that came out of that area where the cops were. She comes over here, and then she starts just clamoring about the same area where Eric was killed. We want a prison. We want 1,000 more cops. How do you think I felt? So it's like, oh, and Valerie, 2 weeks after her son was killed, the police in that area, talk about police that are afraid of the cholos. Senora from Echo Park. They took her kids, because they were lighting candles where the police killed her son, and they handcuffed all her family again. When was that, a month later? How is she supposed to come up here and have composure? A minute ago, she was here crying and crying. I cannot believe the way the police culture is treating us and wants to continue to fill the prisons with our youth.
The next speaker, Amos. Is there an Amos?
So I won't get kicked out of the meeting.
Next speaker, please.
Mr. Soberov, maybe this is what I should do.
The next speaker, Amos, followed by Melina Abdullah.
Morning, sir.
It's rather unfortunate again that the community is here. I think this police commission was created out of a mess, and thus you all are keep recreating a mess. And it's interesting that this house nigga is leaving this meeting, because this is the biggest mess I've ever seen. I've seen this police officer personally get on the stand and lie. So my question to you all this morning, and I'll be back again and again, how do you keep police officers from lying on the witness stand? And how do you hold them accountable when you watch them lie on the witness stand? Are there any answers? Y'all got more? I'm noticing y'all have more problems than you have solutions. You've got more harm than you have any thing to addressing the harm. So that is my question to you all this morning. This black brother who just walked back here, who is a career house nigga, lying on other black people in Los Angeles to get them arrested. This brother right here. And as long as I come, I'm going to keep addressing you, because you are actually a good symbol now that I have to show how fucked up the LAPD is, personally. And then secondly, all these non-people of color on here, I don't know what the hell y'all are doing up here. Because Steve Silverov, you are too damn rich to be sitting up here. You're too compromised to be sitting up here. And you don't say shit. You sit here as if nothing bothers you because police don't harass you. So the moment that this board continues...
Next speaker, please. Next speaker.
Melina Abdullah.
Next president, please. We're looking for a next president. A president that can help fill up this room with people.
Next speaker, please.
Melina Abdullah, please.
Next speaker. I'm going to ask you to give up the microphone and sit down.
We need people on here that
Or we will recess the meeting and just go into closed session. Are you gonna give up the microphone? We're gonna recess into closed session.
Recess is for elementary school.
Go ahead. What?
Good job, Mr.
Hey.
President. Wow.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, look at all them coming down. Look at them. House nigga number 1, house nigga number 2, house nigga number 3.
Sir, are you gonna leave, or are we gonna recess this meeting? I'm gonna ask you to leave too, or we're gonna recess the meeting. You gotta. There's some other people that would really like to speak. So, okay. No, he's going to leave. Professor Abdullah, it's your turn.
You think that dude is over there listening?
Maybe not, but I'm going to say what I have to say.
Next speaker, please.
The next speaker, Melina Abdullah.
Is she going to speak or no? I don't see where. Is she here?
Yes, she's here.
Okay.
So one, that was ridiculous. Why did we need that many police to escort someone out for speaking? For speaking. Today is election day, and we're supposed to be, I think a lot of us, even Steve Soboroff is supposed to be voicing his dissent around Trump, right? You're a Republican, but you don't stand with Trump. Isn't that what we've heard you say? But how are you acting? How are you engaging? How are you shutting down public comment? How are you compromising democracy? This is supposed to be a democratic space. That was completely unnecessary. I want to open in the name of Albert Ramon Dorsey, who you spent last week demonizing, who you all murdered while he was naked in the shower, and then tried to act like there's some justification, like he posed some threat. This is what his family says of him. Chasing a dream of becoming a rapper, he left home alone and headed to the City of Angels. He's from PG County, Maryland. On October 29, 2018, Albert Ramon Dorsey, aka Mello, who was a 30-year-old black man, was shot and killed in the gym locker room while he was naked in the shower by LAPD. To know him was to love him. Best described as a, quote, gentle giant, he would give his last and his all to help another person. It has already been 3 days since the incident occurred, and we need to have Ramon embalmed and transported via air from LA. They don't have the money to bury their child. They don't have the money to bury their child because you all, as you always do, will rule his murder in policy. And that means he's not eligible for Victims of Violent Crime Fund.
Next speaker, please.
We have another speaker.
You have no other speakers? I think the family wanted to speak again.
This is public comment. We have no other speakers in public comment.
Okay. Okay. Your time's over? Okay, so
The next item is closed session items.
Go to closed session.
We have 8 cards.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry?
We have 8 comment cards.
Okay. Let's go ahead with the first one.
The first one is Mr. Novick.
This is your last warning, Professor. Professor, I'm going to ask you to leave the meeting. You need to leave the meeting. You need to leave the meeting. Let's have the first speaker.
The first speaker, Mr. Novick.
You need to leave the meeting, Professor, or I'm going to adjourn to closed session. I think the family would like to speak. So are you going to leave the meeting or no? Just let me know. Are you going to leave the meeting or not? I just need to know. I think the family would like to speak. Would you give them that courtesy and respect, or would you like the meeting? Okay. Okay, then we're going to adjourn. Sorry, family. We're going to adjourn because Professor Abdullah is refusing to leave the meeting. We'll go into closed session. I can't help it. These people are trying to take over the meeting. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Then you, Professor, are you going to leave this meeting out of respect to the family or no? What? I'm not going to let him speak while she's here. She is, Professor Abdullah, leave this meeting. I'm asking you, I gave you a warning. You don't abide by the rule. I've asked you to leave the meeting. I'm going to adjourn this meeting if you don't leave. I know what you want, but this is not your meeting. I'm sorry. You need to leave this meeting or we are about to adjourn. Okay, so we'll take a recess and we will come back. Family, we're gonna require that she be removed. Okay? Thank you. Okay, we're going to come back from the recess. I note, Dr. Abdullah, I'll give you one more opportunity to leave the meeting. You're not leaving the meeting, so we will recess into closed session. I invite the family to. I invite the family. Are you leaving? Sure. Okay, next speaker, please. Okay.
The next speaker, Tammy Murillo, followed by Beatrice Boyd and Priscilla Vergara Murillo.
Are those the last three?
These are the
families.
These are the families.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. President, I believe we're on item 6A1. Is that correct, Madam Secretary?
Yes,
yes,
we are.
sir.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to say before that Ventura County has a crisis and intervention team program in place. In fact, on the 14th of November, I'm actually going to attend the Simi Valley Police Station to find out more about it, because there was an officer that actually years ago that did take a young man's life, and it affected him terribly, and he created this program to help de-escalate situations so people aren't killed, because there has to be a change. There truly does. This is a more comprehensive approach than the LAPD's current training method. The training method needs also to include all 911 operators, because they don't always get it right. And that sets up the whole dynamic of everything. Deadly force is not always necessary. 1 in 4 people who are killed by law enforcement officials in the United States are unarmed. Sometimes one needs to subdue a potential threat or de-escalate a situation with less lethal force. Police should only use firearms at last resort, because the consequences of lethal force are permanent. I want to speak a little bit about my son. Jesse Daniel Murillo was 32 years old. He was a Navy vet and the youngest of my 3 children. He was an amazing young man. He was incredibly intelligent, caring. He had a huge sense of humor. His laugh was infectious. He was passionate about music. He was an amazing drummer, taught himself to play the piano and guitar. I recently came across my son's resume.
I'm going to let you go ahead, so take your time.
I recently came across my son's resume. Jesse had big plans, and I want the LAPD officers who took my son's life to know what they did. They should have handled this differently. They shoot to kill, not to save and protect. And I'm not saying that to be mean, but it's a fact. That's how they're trained, and that's why there needs to be change. Jesse should be here today pursuing his dreams and watching his nieces and nephews grow up. Jesse just finished 2 AA degrees, one from Mission College and one from Pierce. He had just received his welder certificate and bought a brand new welder. I haven't gone through my son's items yet because when I do, I'm afraid my heart is going to stop. I miss him so much, and it's hard to get up and face the day without him. There were over 50 very aggressive, out-of-control LAPD officers. Witnesses stated that a police car came down DeSoto, made a right on Strathern. 2 officers jumped out of the car and shot him at close range over 8 times. They shot at him over 8 times. Now, the sidewalk is right here, and they pulled up on the curb. That's extremely close range. It was just so unnecessary. Jesse was literally ambushed by LAPD. After he was shot, witnesses said the officers just went back and forth looking at him as he was laying on the ground. The ambulance was not summoned for nearly 17 minutes after my son was shot. Once the paramedics came, they reported that Jesse was talking, and he said, "I feel like I'm suffocating," and then he stopped talking. Witnesses said the paramedics actually dropped Jesse as they were loading him into the ambulance. The law needs to be changed. We as citizens must do something not to allow these officers have the license to kill. They are home with their families, and my son is dead. I don't want my son's death to be in vain. They could have used something to stun him. They do it to animals. Why can't they do it to humans? Jesse never had a machete at any time, nor did he hurt anyone with a weapon. Officer called it wrong, made a grave error. Jesse Daniel Murillo is the true victim of this situation, and justice needs to be served. I would also like to make a statement. I went to the Internal Affairs. My son's laptop computer that he bought a week before he was killed, he spent close to $2,000 on it, disappeared out of my home. Nobody seems to know where it was, where it went. Fancy that. Also, Jesse had cash in his wallet. Not all the cash is there. Internal Affairs is supposedly taking care of this. No one has gotten back to me, which is extremely frustrating. I still don't have a police report. I haven't seen any cams. Don't know where his computer is. And these officers were in our house for over 5 hours without us there. There were many things that happened, many things that went on in the house that night. And I just want to say, as human beings, we need to change. We can't just pull a gun and shoot to kill. It's taking our children's lives away. You know how hard it is to get up and not be able to have your son, "Hey, Mom, what do you want me to make you for dinner?" and give him a big hug. And it's not okay what happened, and it shouldn't have happened the way it happened. And, you know, in my heart, I believe you guys already have what you're going to do, but I wanted to come and say what I wanted to say anyway, because my son's not here to speak up for himself. And that day, he was defending himself. My ex-fiance got in his face, and that's what started this. And my son wrestled him to the ground. Jesse went into his room. It was over. Mark went to his room. Jesse didn't want to talk. Mark came out and said he assaulted me. I'm calling 911. And the rest is history. There was no reason for a 911 call at any time.
And I'll never have my son to hold him and love him and see all the accomplishments and dreams. I'll never be able to do that. And all his nieces and nephews miss their Jesse terribly.
Thank you. We're sorry for your loss. I would like to ask Mr. Teefank to explain what we're going to be doing today in closed session, the role of the police commission, the role of the court system, the role of discipline, etc.
Yes, Mr.
Would you
President.
is that okay with you for us to do that?
Would you like me to do that in private, or would you like me to do it now? I'd be happy to do it before we go upstairs if you like, or I can do it now.
Okay, say that again. I don't understand.
Well, I want to tell you what's going to happen. In other words, we're going to go upstairs. We've been presented with about 1,000 pages of information on this. There are a number of videos which we will see. And I just want to let you know what we're going to be doing and what our role is in making decisions, and then what other people's roles are in making decisions. Are you interested in that?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Teefank?
Absolutely. So the Board of Police Commissioners will adjourn to closed session. The reason it's in closed session is because it's a personnel matter involving the recommendation of the Chief of Police as it relates to the actions of the officers. The Commissioners will receive a presentation from the Force Investigation Division detectives who completed the investigation into the incident. They will also receive a presentation by the Chief of Police as to his recommendations relative to the incident, and then also from the Inspector General an independent analysis and recommendation. When they receive all of that information, which would include in that investigation presentation any videos that are available, any radio transmissions that are available, any 911 calls that are available, they'll hear all of that information. At the end of that time, they will then make a decision on 3 specific areas. One is the tactics of the involved officers. Second is the drawing and exhibiting of firearms by the officers. And the third is the use of lethal force by the officers. Their decision is relevant to the LAPD policy and their compliance to the department's policy. It is an administrative adjudication of the matter. It is not a criminal adjudication of the matter. The criminal case is submitted to the Los Angeles County District Attorney, who will then evaluate the criminal culpability or lack thereof of the officers and make a decision. So you have 2 processes that take place. The commission's role is only as relates to the administrative policy compliance. Criminal law violations relates to the district attorney's process. At the conclusion of the meeting today, you will be able to receive a copy of the redacted report, which would have names of officers removed and any specific tactical information of the recommendations of the Chief of Police to the Commission. And then within the next 3 to 4 days, the Inspector General will post on their website a abridged summary of the incident with the Commission's decision. So the folks from the Family Liaison section who we've been talking to, Sergeant Wilkins, they will be able to get you that copy of the report of the Chief of Police, hopefully by the end of the day or as soon as they have a copy of it. And that's pretty much the process. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to hang around before we go upstairs and answer those.
I do, actually.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
And just one other thing I think that we should cover here. Mr. Teefank, will you explain, or Chief, will you explain after the adjudication the role of discipline, non-discipline, et cetera, which is not a commission role. It is a role of the chief.
Certainly. So, good morning. And again, as it's been expressed, our condolences with the loss of your son. This is a very serious matter. There is no more important matter before the department than the investigation of the circumstances involving the use of deadly force. My recommendations have been made and forwarded to the Commission has been described to you. Following the Commission's decision, their decision as to the findings of the use of deadly force, whether it was in or out of policy. If it is in policy, then there is a process called a tactical debrief of going back and talking with the officers and debriefing the event as to decisions made and actions taken. If the Board of Police Commissioners find that the use of deadly force was out of policy, then that decision comes back to me, and I will review the facts and circumstances, the decision of the Board of Police Commissioner, in light of also the officer's background, including prior disciplinary history and training and experience, and make a determination of one of three things. A, an out-of-policy initiation of a complaint investigation indicating my desire that the matter be adjudicated, and if found sustained as an out-of-policy use of force, discipline that could include termination could be a recommendation that I would make. If it was a matter that I chose that the decision of the Board of Police Commissioners being an out-of-policy shooting would result in a suspension or removal of the officer, 22 days of suspension or greater, including the removal of the officer, then that officer would be directed to what is called a Board of Rights. It's a tribunal, administrative tribunal, made up of 2 command officers and a civilian member from the public. They will review the facts and circumstances, hear testimony, much of which has already been completed, and they'll make a decision independent of me of whether or not the act of misconduct as alleged with the out-of-policy use of force warrants discipline. And they can make that decision and find, other than this commission, they could find in concurrence with this commission, and they could find in concurrence with this commission and recommend a suspension or a removal. That decision is then forwarded to me. As Chief of Police, the charter prevents me from doing anything with that decision other than either affirming the penalty, if they were to say 22-day suspension, or lowering it. I cannot increase it. If the Board of Police Commissioners were to find this shooting out of policy, the Board of Rights find and concur with that decision and apply an act of a penalty or recommend a penalty to me of termination, removal of the officer, then that decision would again come to me. I would review it and either affirm it or reduce it. So in addition to this process, you talked earlier about the actions of the officers and alleged or alluded to theft and other improper activities during the course of this investigation. There is a separate complaint investigation that is ongoing relative to those specific actions. Does not pertain to the actions of your son, but regarding the status of that laptop and anything else that you believe that was done improper relative to the investigation. That is an active investigation. I've been communicated with the Family Support Unit. I believe those officers have spoken with you, but just to affirm, there will be a separate investigation into that. All of this is overseen, and the Office of Inspector General, gentleman to my right, Mark Smith, as the Inspector General, has access, independent of me, to review all facts and circumstances to ensure that the conduct of the investigation is proper and professional and complete. And his actions report back to the Board of Police Commissioners should there be any discrepancies or he believes that my actions as chief have been not taken with seriousness as it should or is somehow deficient. Lastly, all of this is being done as been described as an administrative tribunal, administrative review, policymakers of this board being the Board of Police Commissioners determining in or out of policy. This is all separate and apart from 2 other jurisdictions, that being the county Los Angeles District Attorney, Jackie Lacey, who had DA investigators who came out then on the night of this shooting and who is still reviewing the facts and circumstances. And then lastly, the federal government as to the Department of Justice also has jurisdiction or potential jurisdiction in this matter, and those are also individuals that will, district attorney's position will take and make a report relative to their findings. I do not have that result, but once that report is made public, and which is when it's released to me, that it'll be also released to you. Hopefully that's helped, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
If I could add even just one other quick thing to that. I'm Mark Smith. I'm the Inspector General for Los Angeles Police Department. The role of OIG, as we call it, Office of Inspector General, has been mentioned a couple of times, and I can go into any greater detail you'd like at any time. I believe you met with a member of our staff as well, Julie, who gave you her card. We want to be very accessible to you and anyone else, and just have this meaningful point of view right now, seeing someone who's lost a family member, and I'm sorry to hear it. And behind you, another family member who we had a chance to speak with who underwent a similar loss, Ms. Rivera. We want to make sure that we are available and open to you. Please hang on to that card. We can meet with you to talk more about this process. It was kind of detailed and lengthy. There are a lot of steps to it. We want to make sure you have the time to understand it, so we're available to you to do that as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Beatrice Boyd.
Can we adjust the microphone?
The oxygen mic. Oh, drop my paper.
Would you like to sit at the front table here? Would that be easier for you to sit up here?
Oh, this is good. Thank you, sir.
Okay, take your time.
Hi, my name is Beatrice Boyd. I was a volunteer for LAPD for 16 years. I'm here to tell you about Jesse. I don't have a lot to say, but here it goes. Jesse Murillo. He was a good citizen. He respected people. He served his nation, his country. He was a United States Navyman, and he was in the Gulf War. He was a Gulf War veteran. Jesse was very kind. I had a 5-way bypass in 2014, and he was a young man that came to see me in the hospital. How many young men do that for old people like me? Very kind, and much more than that. I cannot understand why anyone would want to take his life. He was such an understanding young man, and sweet and kind, and would drop in at my house maybe for lunch or something like that. But we always got together on Veterans Day because I myself am a veteran from the Cuban Missile Crisis. So I just can't understand what happened with Jesse. He was so kind. We really needed him around. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Priscilla Vergara Murillo.
To the family, we've received the package of letters and correspondence that you gave to me. I've read them. Other commissioners are looking at them. They will become a part of the record. Thank you for doing that. Okay. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was trying to see if my phone would turn on so I can have what I had to say.
Want somebody else to speak now, and do you want a couple minutes to try and get that going?
No, that's okay.
Okay.
I haven't. I'm here to speak about my little brother, Jesse Daniel Murillo. My little brother was an amazing individual. He served his country well for 4 years. He was a Navy veteran, and upon his honorable discharge out of the service, he was even promoted to an E6. After his return home, he then served another 2 years in the Navy Reserve. He loved his country, and he loved his family above all. My little brother was not only a veteran of our nation, but he was studying computer science and engineering. He had completed his AA and several certifications. Before the night of December 23rd, 2017, he was planning on continuing his educational goals at California State University, Northridge, the exact same college as his big sister. He had dreams and goals to be more than a productive person of society. He would have helped change the world for the better. and would have if he had been given the respect and consideration of being innocent before judgment of being guilty. He was a brilliant mind and was a creative genius. He was helping my children achieve their educational goals as well, giving them support and love. He loved giving them the knowledge and wisdom he had from his life experiences, like music, history, science, and art. He was not a criminal in any way, shape, or form. He was a great person and always will be missed. The tragedy that occurred on the evening of December 23rd, 2017, did not have to end the way it had.
Go ahead, take your time.
Thank you. His beautiful life force was ripped from us without a thought. He was recklessly taken. On that night, my family was violated not only by our constitutional and civil rights, but also our family was torn apart. The LAPD, I feel, should have handled the situation extremely differently. On top of that, there were many witnesses who were not interviewed, despite our reports and requests. The LAPD detectives also tried to lie both to my mother that evening and myself in order to enter our home without proper procedure. I feel that the LAPD has too many times used extreme excessive force. And on that night, way too many units were present. It was unnecessary. I hope and pray that people will start to listen to each other and that change will occur so that this doesn't happen to other families. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker, Elizabeth Campbell.
Hi. Good morning. I actually wrote a letter, so I'm kind of going to summarize what I wrote. Jesse was probably one of my closest friends at the time, and I actually found him because I'm a very musical person. I was searching for a new drum teacher because I want to improve my drum skills, and I just happened upon him, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, someone who can help me. But it really went beyond that. Just after hanging out with him, we discovered that we had a lot of things in common, and so we hiked together, we watched movies together, we played music together, and through that, I really discovered he's one of the most giving people that I've ever met. He puts you before himself. He doesn't judge. He's so respectful, loving, kind-hearted. I remember a time we went out to dinner and we ordered a lot of food, and he paid for my meal, and he said, no, I got this. You know, I just got paid. And I'm thinking, wow, you're paying me with just what you just got paid? Wow. You know, and that just kind of blew my mind. I'm having a hard time putting this all into words because I still haven't wrapped my mind around the fact that he's gone. I wasn't there that night, but I think when I heard about it, I thought it wasn't real, because I thought, how could someone take the life of someone so giving, so loving, so kind-hearted that would never hurt anybody? So I guess I just asked that he be given justice, you know, the justice that he deserved when he was alive and the justice that he deserves now, you know, that he be treated fairly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael Shulagi.
Sir.
Hi. My name is Michael Szilagyi. I'm also a veteran. Me and Jesse had a lot in common. He was my nephew. In fact, we had both been to the Persian Gulf. As an ex-naval operations specialist, our unit was the first to go into the Gulf. So, my biggest problem with what happened that day is I spoke to him an hour, literally an hour, before he was shot. Had trouble getting through the police barricades. But my biggest problem was the transparency. And I do want to share a couple things because the media got a few things wrong. One of the reasons he had the mask that he had, we had been working under the house that day. And the mask was for his safety. When you're doing plumbing, the bar he had was a flooring bar. Ironically, I told him when I saw it, he didn't need it because I had one, and that he should take it back to Home Depot. But the chief problem is the transparency. What Tammy didn't tell you is a lot of our family, friends, and even our police officers, retired Commander Val Panacea has done angel tree deliveries with us. In fact, the police are not your enemy. And the reason I say that is if you knew how many police officers made angel tree deliveries. My mentor was a retired LAPD. And he coordinated. He coordinated for the San Fernando Valley. But the transparency, we just need to know if this was justified. We know police want to go home at night, but the wounds indicate Jesse was moving away. But they've released no video cam, nothing. And if he was moving towards police felt threatened, we can live with that. We can't live with non-transparency. We can't deal with not knowing. We need, we don't even want it released to the public. We don't want to turn people against the police. We want to know. We want to see the videos. If there's training, firing, fine. Training needs to be done. My mentor, retired LAPD sergeant, police chaplain, used to teach ethics. And I've seen the code of conduct for the police officers. I have copies of it at home. And you should share it with people. Because we mentor and we do Bible studies with state felons. Been into federal institutions, used to go in and teach up in California City and stuff. Police are not our enemy, but we need to know. And for a year, nobody's had answers. And that's what we need to know. Because some of our best friends are cops. What Beatrice didn't tell you is her uncle was the first on scene during the Tate LeBlanca murders. He's a cop and a good friend. And And like I say, I've seen so many angel tree deliveries done by police to felons, to people who have an incarcerated parent. The entire San Fernando Valley was coordinated by a police officer. So, and we need to stop treating police like they're the enemy, because they need to be in our communities. They need to keep us safe. But we don't need them shooting us up because they're scared. So training needs to take place. If people engage with enemies in wars can be trained not to shoot unless fired upon, why can't the police? I mean, a flooring bar? One of the reasons we're upset is one of the witnesses told my sister her son went and called her and told her, I'm upset because the police just shot a guy and he was unarmed. If a kid can tell somebody's unarmed, why can't the police? They need training. This can't continue. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next speaker, Mr. Novick, followed by Adam Smith.
Mr. Novick?
Yeah, my heart goes out to the Murillo family. I lost a son who was also a veteran, just in a traffic accident. So, I understand what kind of grief they're going through. I think it's important to talk about a couple of things in terms of the police commission. For the new commissioners, I think you should note that the amount of explanation that was given here today is unusual. And think about the difference in how this case is being handled in terms of a comparison to the case of Waukesha Wilson and a lot of other people and families who have come before you equally grief-stricken, and the level of respect they received at the hands of the chief and the commission in the past. I also think it's important to talk about the fact that although you're looking at one particular case, your responsibility as commissioners is to look at the policy. If you are ruling over and over again, as you have, that these killings are in policy, then you have to question the policy. You have to question the pattern and practice of policing in the city that results in incidents like this one. You have to look at the fact that when law enforcement is given a mission of being an occupying army, a colonial policing force that is based on white supremacy, that there's an inevitable spillover, that the kind of mentality that you're generating in the police department, in which they basically see the population of the city as people to be feared and controlled, is going to lead to incidents like this inevitably. And until you take on your responsibility as people charged with representing the community at large and overseeing these kinds of activities, and start to change those policies and change those patterns and practices, you're going to have cases like this. This is case number 81 during 2017 that required some amount of oversight by the police commission. So you have to understand that these three particular officers are not the problem.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Adam Smith, followed by Paula Miner.
To Tammy and the family, I'm so sorry that you're here today. I wanted to speak on Jesse's case today specifically because, it's one that I've brought up multiple times in the last 11 months since he's been killed in this room. And I think, I don't know if it's Michael, is that his name, brought up that a child saw that Jesse was unarmed. And multiple times I brought up Jesse because of the way that Chief Beck, almost 2 weeks later in this room, lied and said to all of us that Jesse was armed with, and used the word armed, and I think he said like a spiked pole. And this, because Jesse was killed on the 23rd of December, the next police commission meeting was about 2 weeks later. And to think that the chief of police doesn't know what was in the dude's hand is ridiculous. I know, Chief Moore, I've brought this up to you multiple times about the way that these folks are represented by the chief in the chief's report and by the commission with words like suspect and accusatory language that criminalizes people after they've already been killed. And I think I just hope that the new commissioners and the old ones, all of you, don't think about the way that these kids are being criminalized after they're being killed. There were media reports when Jesse was killed saying he was wearing a gas mask and wielding a machete. That information had to have come from the fucking police. All of that information comes from the police, and the chief's report obviously is going into the ears of the LA Times and every other media person that's here. And that is how I'm worried all of you are informed and worried that you've been...
Next speaker, please.
The next speaker, Paula Miner, followed by Ted Hayes.
I too stand with the family of Jesse Murillo, and I respect their grief. We've been coming to the commission since the murder by LAPD of Ezell Jones in 2014, and we have heard the same kind of grief, the same kind of story about individuals who have been murdered, who were unarmed or in questionable situations, and none of those cases, numerous cases since 2014, have the police, I think in only one case, been found out of policy. None of the cases have resulted in any kind of prosecution. We hope today that maybe that pattern will be broken. Maybe we'll begin to have some transparency, some accountability, and some justice for those within our community that are being terrorized and murdered by LAPD. And I'd also like to say that this is the first time, and I've been coming for a long time, I have ever heard the explanation given by Mr. T. Fink, by the Office of Inspector General, and by Chief Moore of that process. I think every family that comes here, and you all know these families, hundreds of them come here when their loved ones' names are on closed session, do not get that kind of information. I think that's important. I respect that you did it today, and I hope you will continue to do that. And I stand in respect for Jesse Murillo, and I say his name, Jesse Murillo. Jesse Romero. Say his name. Jesse Murillo.
Next speaker.
Ted Hayes.
Mr. Hayes. Welcome back. Sir, would you like to come up to the front here? Use that. All right.
You're coming dangerously close to the year in which these things should be concluded. The 12th will be the month. That was installed by the consent decree some time ago. Now, I want to give you a heads up. Trump was lying when he said they were violating the flag. No, they were violating the third stanza of the United States national anthem, which says, "Kill the slave and kill the hirelings." At the complaint department, Internal Affairs, there's a desecration of the United States flag. The white stripes remain white, but the blue stripes have become black, like the black and white card, I imagine. And the stars are a different color. And the middle stripe is a blue stripe, the thin blue line. You can't desecrate the American flag, even if you are Internal Affairs. You can't do that. I dare you to go look at that. I want a report back from either one of you as to how it happened, who allowed it to happen, who paid for it. Her name is Gloria Hills. Her address is 5963.5 West Boulevard, WST. I can't file a complaint against her because she's a complete operative. Okay? I've run to 77th Street 3 times. I spent an hour and 45 minutes waiting to make the report. Nothing ever happened. The next day I go back, an hour, nothing ever happened. Spoke to the lieutenant, nothing ever happened. Spoke to 3 sergeants, nothing ever happened. Miss Hills has stolen my phone, 2 of my blenders. I want them back.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other speakers?
There are no other public comment cards on item number 6. The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss item number 6A1 in accordance to Government Code 54957. The Board of Police Commissioners has concluded its work in closed session. We are back in open session. In closed session, item number 6A1 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. Mr. President, is there a motion to adjourn?